welcome back to another episode of the Daily Wisdom Words podcast, where every week we talk to folks who have stories, advice, and life hacks, all of which take you one step closer to that feeling of hope. I'm your co-host, Neil Chiretti.
And I am your co-host, Remy O'Day.
And today we have a guest who is a lot of things, has a lot of credits to his name, and is doing a lot of stuff. But he might say that his specialty is being a human being. So, no, I can't. But that is important, by the way, as we'll probably talk about. That is very crucial in life, to be human. But no, we have coach, author, educator, lots of other stuff. Motivational talk speaker, all kinds of stuff. We have Paul Larsen with us. Hey, Paul, welcome to the show. It is such a pleasure to have you.
Oh my gosh,
Welcome,
it is
Paul.
like, oh my gosh, I feel like just a warm embrace, a warm hug from both of you. So thank you so much. And it's definitely, yeah, it's an honor to be here. And yeah, you know, I'm human. You hit the nail on the head with that. You know, bong. I'm excited. I'm honored. I get frustrated. I get angry. I judge. I compare. I get jealous. I'm inspiring. I get inspired. I have the full range of the human mosaic, the human hybrid, what I call kind of the human quilt of who we are. And I wrap myself in it. And I try not to lean away from any of that because it's what makes me who I am. So anytime we can certainly talk more about it, but anytime any of those things kind of like, you know, the alarm goes off or the trigger goes off or anything, it tells me something about what's going on with me, what's going on in the situation, and what I may or may not need to pay attention to. But I always use it just as a wonderful sort of awareness, just an awareness alarm for myself.
How long did it take you to discover that you had that?
Oh, you know, I just had a birthday yesterday, by the way, and
happy birthday!
Oh,
happy birthday!
Thank you,
Oh,
Sagittarius. And the reason I brought the birthday up is because I'm starting my let's just say 6+ decade around the earth, around our universe, around source.
You mean 40th.
Oh, okay. I love you. I love you.
Yeah.
I love you, Bernie. I love you. Love, Bernie. And the reason I brought that up is because it probably has been an evolvement for me and a growth for me. In fact, I was talking to my coach yesterday about it, and I said, you know, even 10 years ago, which would have been a certain maturity in life at 10, you know, where I was 10 years ago at 50, one would think, oh, maybe I would have had kind of that level of self-awareness to your question. And I did, but nowhere near what I've been able to do over the last maybe 10 years. So it's just to me, it's what I work with myself on, and then I work with other people on, is the difference between reacting and responding. And reacting is exactly what we kind of just talked about. I'm this, I'm that. Oh my gosh. And social media is all about reacting, right? It's all about just how many likes, how many ticks, how many posts, how many, you know, whatever your platform is, and it's reacting to that, and then it's reacting to how come they have such a wonderful life, and how come they're eating such wonderful food, or whatever the image is, right?
Yeah.
The response, the ability to respond, is to take 5 seconds, maybe 5 minutes, maybe it's 5 hours, maybe it's 5 days, but whatever that time frame might be, and to actually sit with that and think, wait a minute, my reaction is this, but do I want my reaction to frame who I am? Do I want my reaction to author my next thought and step? Because we get into this swirl and we get into this kind of churning, and then it becomes like we're in it. And I've learned to be disciplined around hold on, I'm reacting. I understand I'm reacting, and I want to respond. And maybe I want to respond the same way. Maybe the response and the reaction is aligned. It could be, but it will be a thoughtful response around that.
Mm-hmm.
Many times my response won't be what I react to. And it will be something where I sit and just say, this is how I want to respond to this situation, to this trigger, to this environment, to this person, to my thought, whatever that is. So to your question's a really good one, because it's probably just taken, for me, just the growth of nesting in that growth mindset and really understanding then how I can respond to situations versus just react.
That's fantastic. I tell my kids all the time, I wish I knew in my 20s what I know now. Listen to me, because I'm telling you, don't do this, don't do that, but they have to find their own way in life. And,
that's it. I am a firm believer in we have to experience certain things. Academically, we can read things, and we can be told things, and we can be coached things, and we can be directed, and our parents and teachers and husbands and wives and boyfriends and girlfriends and partners and friends. But until you actually nest in it, until you actually take action on something or whatever that might be, we really have not immersed ourselves in that. And that's the science. The science is we follow that, we read about it, we follow a model. The art is kind of like what's behind me here. It's like bringing in all the vibrancy, the colors, the volatility, the chaos, and then making it our own, and understanding that no matter what this is, it can be beautiful. It can be beautiful.
And we can survive it. And we can survive it.
Not only can we survive it, but we can thrive in it. We can thrive in it. But absolutely survive it. Yeah.
100%. I believe in that. What you survive, you can thrive.
Absolutely. The pivot from survive to thrive doesn't have to be as great a leap as what conventional wisdom might say, right? Right. It really doesn't. Yeah.
Speaking of that surviving, let's get into it. Tell us a little bit about your background and some of the events, like you said, right? You have to experience it in order to fully grasp and then learn how to cope with it. So tell us some of the things. I know one of them was certainly a memorial where it was a pivotal where your mindset changed. But tell us a little bit about your background and what sort of ultimately led to doing what you do today.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for asking that. I mean, we are who we are, right? We are our story. And so when I look at
that's
the pages,
true.
And we create our story. And we can create, and I always look at, like, some people in my story are a page, some are a chapter, some might be, and we get to choose that. It's always a choice. And that became very apparent to me back in 2009, really. And I was sitting in this church, and it was my father's memorial service. And he had a blessed life. He was a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful guy. And so we're sitting there, it's in June, and the sun's coming through, and it's beautiful. And I'm kind of sitting there, and you're kind of like, you're honoring the transition, the passing, but he's in a much better space and out of a lot of pain. So it's blessed. Well, everyone gets up at his memorial service. By the way, this is what you want to happen at your memorial service too. But they get up and they take a microphone and they talk about what a wonderful man he was, right? It was like, it was just incredible. People were lining up to get up and take the microphone and say that, Captain Alfie was this and Captain Alfie was that. My dad's name was Alf, so they called him Alfie, and he was a captain because he was an airline pilot. And people were coming from everywhere and talking about 50 years ago, he was a neighbor of ours. We haven't seen him in 50 years, but we remember him because when I lost my job, he brought over, he helped us with this 50 years ago. People that were working with him in more recent times were saying he was so wonderful. He treated everyone with respect. He treated all of us as a team and as a colleague on the plane and everything. The way what I heard about him was his legacy. It was what he represented. It was how he lived his life. It was not a surprise to me because I knew him to be that person. So I'm sitting there and listening to this, and it was just filling me up with just like warm socks in a bureau drawer out of the dryer. I was just getting all this warm feeling like, oh my gosh. And then my ego pops in for a minute and says, okay, wait a minute, Paul, wait a minute. What are they going to say about you? What are they going to say at your memorial service? Are they going to say these types of things? But what are they really going to say? And it was, for an ego question, because our ego can get in the way a lot, but for an ego kind of driven question, it was a beautiful question, because it was like, I was sitting there, and I'll never forget it. It was like the person that had the microphone at that time, I blanked out, and I couldn't hear what they were saying anymore, because it just became like this, like, oh my Lord, what are they going to say about me? What am I writing in my life and authoring in my life that they're going to like come up and what difference am I making in their lives? Because that's what I'm hearing. What am I inspiring in people? And I was sitting there, and I started to kind of just get kind of like this uncomfortable feeling around it, because I knew kind of the answer. And I started answering what I thought would be what they would author, which was, Paul is a great, HR leader. Paul has helped me lay off 450 people. Paul has helped me interview 700 people. Right, exactly. Paul has helped me create compensation plans and incentive plans for our sales group. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God. No. It's not that that's not important, and it's not that I perhaps didn't make a difference in that, and I don't want to dilute those efforts, right? But that's not what I want to be known for. That's not the inspiration, the wisdom, or anything else that I thought I had and that I thought I could impart. And it became a very pivotal moment for me to sit there and realize I have to rewrite this. I have to start a new page. I have to start a new chapter. And it was at that point that I really thought, I need to go and figure out what that's going to be. And the only way I'm going to be able to do that is to make some changes in my life and to step out of the comfort of where I'm at. I was at Adobe Technology, which is an incredible company, beautiful company, brilliant company, creative company, and really, really had a culture of a lot of heart. So it wasn't the company. It wasn't the company. It was not the organization. It was not the people. I had a great job. I led HR for one of the big global enterprises. And so it was not that, but it was like, this is not what I want to be known for. Now, my mind was around, what do I need to do? I didn't quite have that answer, but I knew intuitively, if I listened to my intuition versus up here, all of my saboteur voices, all of my little inner critics and the gremlins or whatever we have up here, they were saying, stay where you are. Are you crazy? This is 2009. We're just coming out of an economic, one of the economic recessions du jour, right? We got, you're at a great company, you're making good money, you got great job. Are you nuts? And it was like, well, maybe I am. And so maybe I am, and maybe I need to kind of figure out what that means. And what does that mean from a risk perspective, right? And what do I need to do, and so forth. So fast forward, I wasn't I just, this happened on a Monday and I left on a Tuesday. I was very strategic, so to speak, in like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I need to kind of figure out what that is, and then go and figure out what those steps would be. And so I did that. And that was an incredibly pivotal moment. I think to your question and why it was so pivotal is also because I was open to it, I was approachable to it, and I was available to it. To what you had mentioned, what we talked about earlier about, the emotional growth we go through as humans. Maybe if that had happened at another time frame, I would not have ever even been, it wouldn't have been something I would have approached. It wouldn't have been something that clicked up here. It wouldn't have been something that took me in that different direction. But I was sitting there that day, and I was sitting there listening and enveloped in this kind of joy. And then I was just open to it. And so that was the piece for me to kind of go out. We hear a lot about, go live your passion, go find your passion, but we also have to eat. And we also have to we have other responsibilities, we have other accountabilities, we have other things. And sometimes it can be just enough to get up in the morning, much less go find my passion, right? And
right.
Not, and just what you were saying earlier, not just surviving, but how do I thrive? And so that became for me sort of just a very living moment of crafting a legacy that is living, not waiting to when I transition to hear the difference I make. I wanted to do it when I was living and understand that.
Right.
Wow.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's one thing that we try to stress a lot on this podcast is the element of practicality and a rationale behind whatever someone's passion and dreams are. Because all too often, especially in this day and age on social media and stuff, you read these quotes and affirmations, which are helpful. Don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking them. They feel good to read, positive. You can do it. Nothing is impossible. And they're right. It is. It's not impossible. But what sometimes they do miss out on is that the practical aspect that you're talking about is, it's like, okay, go for your dreams for sure, but put some thought behind it. Put some thought, even if it's your passion, right? And that's what so I'm so glad you stressed that, because that's something we try to also stress on this podcast a lot.
Yeah. Just, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. And another thing we always stress is there's always hope.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have hope too, because otherwise we'd all be where your dad is.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Well, no, you have to, no, your point is, I think your point's a great one, because why wait until then? We can have hope right now, and we don't want to wait until it's too late, whatever too late is, right? And people give up on hope so early. To your point, we see this all the time. We see just tragedy after tragedy of people just giving up on hope, or they live with their life without hope, and then they transition, and we can have hope if we choose to find it within ourselves first. And it's wonderful to have the external validations, and to our points, all the external affirmations and all that. That's wonderful, but really, we have to really find it within ourselves around what that is.
Yeah.
And for me to have that moment that I just talked about, if I even back up from that, that was 2009. If I go back to like 2004, that would have been something that was another moment in my life where it was like, oh my gosh, like, how could I even that was the moment where I really, where I was introduced to the whole concept of imposter syndrome, which I now I now really lean into. And to think that I went from that in 2004 to 5 years later, really thinking, I get to choose how my life is going to play out and be. And it's not about what I could have done, and it's not about what will happen. It's being in that moment. And I think what you just said there about be was very pivotal. That one word, how are we? How are we being right now? That's all we have. And that's what sitting in that church with my dad's, that whole thing was, I was right there. And then it allowed me to sit in that moment and then to think of the future. But I had to be in that moment right there to really hear it.
And this brings up oh my gosh, something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. No one is going to come to your front door and rescue you. And in that church, you did it yourself.
Yeah.
You did it yourself. So it can be done. Don't wait for that person to knock on your door, because they're never coming. Yeah. It is within. It is within. We all have it. You don't have to be, an astronaut, a doctor, a lawyer. You just have to be happy in what you're doing and with your friends and your family,
Exactly.
That's how I look at life. I just, I don't want to be upset and sad. I want to be happy. So let's get into imposter syndrome. I
Sure.
have wanted to talk about this for a long time because I think I have times where I'm absolutely 100% in it. I know I was in high school. I told Neil the story yesterday is that really in high school, you know, I had a group of friends. They were all wealthy. My mom raised 10 kids by herself, so we weren't wealthy. And I pretended I was. I wanted to be like them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I know now I look back and I go, oh my God, I wasn't even me, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah. Imposter syndrome is you did a wonderful framework there. And my first introduction to it was I was in an incredible job that I got promoted sort of into, which is another fact that happens a lot with imposter syndrome. Change jobs, we go into schools, we become parents. Something happens in our life that kind of changes our role a little bit by choice, usually. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves, and I was sitting there and I would feel like a fake. Like, you know, one of these days I'm looking around and I'm sitting at a table with all the other leaders. I'm like, one of these days they're going to figure out I don't know what I'm doing. And I shouldn't be in this job. And
hello.
Right. And I'm a fraud. And, you know, I this was a company that was owned by, it was a private equity company owned by JP Morgan. And I'd go back to New York as a head of HR, and I'd give board of directors presentations, and I'd sit up there and I'd give and I'm like, I don't belong here. I'm not, you know, I don't belong in this huge ornate room with all these, you know, PhDs and MBAs from Harvard and Yale and all these pedigrees, right? All these letters after the name. And, you know, again, it goes back to, I'm human. And I'd be sitting there, but I'd give my presentations and I said, okay, one of these days they're going to come up and they're going to tap me and they're going to say, you know, Paul, we know that you don't know what you're doing, so we're going to ask you to leave. You've been found out. Now, this was crazy thinking for me. Literally, it was really like, what is going on here? Why am I having these thoughts? Why am I swirling in this? And then it was one of my mentors at the time who sat with me, and she asked me the question that I just kind of mentioned. She says, Paul, let me ask you, do you feel like a fraud sometimes? And I was like, nobody had ever said anything like this. Like, these are all thoughts that were up here. It was like she opened up the attic door, you know, and all the dust and maybe a couple bats flew out and there's like dust and all this stuff. And I said, oh my gosh, she used the word fraud. And in that split moment, I almost said, no, I'm fine. You know, my ego was trying to get the better of me, saying, no, don't admit it. But I just was like, oh, yeah, I do.
Maybe you have a point there, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And she says, oh.
But good for you for admitting it.
Yeah. I was so tired of carrying the burden. Going back to all that we've talked about in terms of what we carry mentally and what we carry up here, I was tired of carrying this burden because the job was hard enough. Life was hard enough. And I had this extra burden of these thoughts that was like, carrying like this other person that I was supposed to be, because that's what imposter syndrome is. She looked at me and she says, oh, you have imposter syndrome. Like it was like, oh, you're wearing a blue sweater. Oh, you have black shoes. Oh, you have brown hair. Like, oh, you have imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And I looked at her like, what is that? And we talked more about it. And I really, I said, okay. And the more she described it, the more it was like, absolutely. It's an actual, you know, it was actually coined and founded in 1978 by some medical researchers. It's actually more of an imposter phenomenon than it is an actual medical syndrome, but it took on the name syndrome. It really is a couple of things that really kind of harbor the behaviors or the thoughts. Is one is we think people have a higher opinion of us than we do ourselves, that they have an inflated view of who we are, and they think we can do a lot of things, and we are sitting down here shrinking, and they are kind of expanding us, right? So that's one thing. And then it's also attributing the fact that we don't belong. We don't belong where we are. We're trying to fit in. We don't deserve it. We feel like a fake or a fraud. All those thoughts that I had. Sometimes in conventional wisdom, and I've seen this on social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, and places like that, people say, "Oh, just have more confidence. Just get more confident. It's just about having confidence." Yeah. And I'm like, no. I'm a very confident imposter. I'm an incredibly confident imposter. I can stand up in front of a room. I can stand on a stage in front of dozens, hundreds, and thousands of people, which I have done and presented things before, and think to myself, they have no idea. I have no clue what I'm doing, that I'm a fraud. But I can stand up there and present something, and they will think that it is true, because it has nothing to do necessarily with confidence. So that's one of the myths that I like to debunk about imposter syndrome. It's not just getting more confident. It really is. Imposter syndrome is what you described about your growing up, about thinking you have to be somebody else to be successful. You have to be another avatar. You have to have another demographic. You have to be somebody else to be successful. Hence the word imposter. You're living like an imposter life. And that's exactly that's what imposter syndrome is, really. Down at the nitty gritty is really thinking that, wow, you don't belong, and that you are questioning all your capabilities, and you have enabled that in your environment, that you could potentially surround yourself as well around people who also enable that imposter syndrome. We call them mask makers. They kind of like make a mask for ourselves, right? Because imposter syndrome is putting on a mask. So here's an example of me. During this time when I was really swirling in this imposter world, people would say to me, "Paul, it's great to see you," like a former colleague. "I hear you got this great job. You're like, wow, you are head of HR, blah, 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 blah. Wow, how wonderful. You are so lucky. Wow, Paul, you are so lucky to have gotten that job. You were in the right place at just the right time. Wow, fate has it all written for you, Paul." Those were actual statements that were actually said to me by people, and they might come from a good place.
Nothing to do with your. Nothing to do with you.
It's like somebody painting this or any other work of art of any kind, and like, "Oh, aren't you lucky you followed the numbers, or aren't you lucky that you crafted that number. Right? Yeah. Isn't that wonderful that you were just in the right place at the right time?" And I bought it. So they're called mask makers in terms of they help us kind of make our mask that we put on. They may not have the bad intent. It's not about them. It's about how we accept that. And it took me a while to realize it has nothing to do with fate or luck or any or being in the right place at the right time. I don't normally believe in any of that anyway. I believe we choose everything we do. But what's missing is what you just said: capabilities, skills, your presence, your energy, your values, your contributions, your leadership, your teamwork, all the things that just like you craft and you bring in the science of art of who you are, and you bring it into none of that. None of that.
I love that you mentioned energy.
Oh, absolutely.
Your energy walks in a room before you do.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Your energy always walks into a room before you do. We are energetic beings. So we give off vibes. We're not, the whole physical sense, we love to think that it's all physical and everything, but we all know, and I know I'm in with my community here with you. We are energetic beings. So we give off vibes. And so that we choose what kind of vibration we're giving off and what we want to receive back. So to your point about earlier when you said nobody's going to come to your door and rescue you, absolutely. If you keep looking for that, or you keep wanting that, and you keep, I don't get this, I don't get that, I'm a victim, I'm you're going to get more of that, because that's the vibration we give off.
Yeah.
And so I got more of that imposter piece because I was giving that off until I firmly just put an anchor in the ground, or a stake in the ground, or whatever we put in the ground. And I said, wait a minute. No, this is ridiculous. It's like, for me, this is like, I'm here because I've made this for myself. I've authored this for myself. When you do the SEO on imposter syndrome, it's always overcome imposter syndrome, beat imposter syndrome, win imposter syndrome, and I'm like, oh, this is like, oh, I'm so tired. I'm going to take a nap with my cat when I think about it. It's like, this is a lot of work.
You can have one of my dogs.
Yeah.
That was literally going to be my next question is, I know something that you really stress on is not trying to fight it or something to overcome, but making it work for you. So yeah, please elaborate on that, because that was literally, my mind was just going there like, yes, please talk about how do we use it in our favor, whatever, instead of trying to fight it.
I love that. Use it in our favor.
That's a good question.
That's a good hashtag. Yeah. Excellent question. Yeah. I celebrate it. So I go even beyond just sort of like, because here's what it is for me. When my imposter, first of all, I think we're all integrated kind of beings. We have to integrate everything in our lives. We're made up of all these different threads and so forth. And I don't know if we ever overcome anything. And maybe we do. But my philosophy is like, that's a lot of friction. That's a lot of fighting. That's a lot of conflict. And I said, it's not that I don't believe in being successful and having incredible results. But I don't like a lot of friction in my life. I like flow. I like to kind of just like, let's figure out.
Me too.
Yeah. Let's take the easy stream, not just like, oh, I got to climb these mountains all the time. Like, on social media, you always see the little avatars or the little vignettes, and they're always like, got to climb the mountain up. And I understand that. And I understand that from a goal perspective. So what I did with imposter syndrome, I said, now, wait a minute, let me deconstruct this. I'm all about, like, I love deconstructed desserts. I love desserts. So it's like, how do you deconstruct? I know, right? So how do I deconstruct imposter syndrome? Okay. So when it happens to me, when I hear that voice, or I get triggered by that thought or that emotion or whatever it might be, that's like my imposter kind of like coming up and talking to me. When does that happen? Well, it happens when I'm trying to go do something, or in something, or about to go do, there's certain areas in our lives, as I mentioned to you. Well, wait a minute. Those are great things. Those are positive things. Those are things where I potentially can learn. They're stepping out of my comfort zone, my CZ. There's a growth mode in that, which, our fixed mindset is like, get back. Don't grow. Keep it as it is. And the imposter is doing that as well by keeping you in this hole. So what I've decided to do is I decided to just say, no, wait a minute. For the imposter piece, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to, like, every time that happens to me, every time I feel it, think it, whatever it might be, I'm going to celebrate. I'm just going to thank it. I'm going to have gratitude, be grateful for it, because it means I'm doing something new. I'm in something new. It might be uncomfortable. I own that. It might be awkward. I own that. It might even give me that sick feeling in the stomach, which as an introvert, I get quite a bit when I'm in like large groups and everything else in my life. It's like, I've gotten used to that. But it's like, you know what? I own that. I'm going to own that. So I'm going to sort of like, wow. So the next time it kind of comes up, I'm going to start to kind of play it differently, not fight it, not avoid it, but just sort of like try to dilute it. And that's what it became for me, was to say, no, when my imposter voice is coming up, or the feeling, it's like you're doing something new. You're actually stepping out. And that's where it became like working it to what you said earlier about working it in my favor versus fighting it. Oh, okay, I got to slam it shut. I got to get rid of it. I don't know if I can get rid of it because it's who I am. It's earmarked in my DNA to some degree. Do I have it a lot less now than I did, years ago? Absolutely. And that's because I've been disciplined about just kind of owning it and celebrating it. So when I work with my clients, I always own that imposter piece. And they're like, what? Like, what? Yes, you want to get in and you want to get in that sandbox and you want to dig and you want to create your sandcastle. It's going to be pretty and everything else, to own that imposter piece. So it's something that is brilliant versus something that is ugly and that you hate and that we have to get rid of. There's enough of that stuff all over in life. Why bring more of that into who you are? Own this piece of you as being vibrant and colorful, because it is a part of you. So that's how I do that. And I finesse myself in terms of, like my thoughts or how I am around that.
Well, don't you think everyone has it? Every single person has it.
I think
in some form.
So that's a great point. The great news about imposter syndrome is that up to 90%, and here's the key word, 90% of successful professionals in any realm, age, gender, industry, it doesn't matter, have admitted to having imposter syndrome, syndrome at one or more times in their life. 90% of successful professionals. So when people say, when I ask a room, I did a workshop the other day, and I said, how many of you, once we talked about how many of you admit to having imposter syndrome? Well, not everyone even wants to raise their hand, but a good majority in the room did. And I said, congratulations. It's kind of like Oprah with, you get a car, and you get a car, and you get a car. It's like, you have imposter syndrome.
Really? Okay, I'm ready.
You have imposter syndrome. Because you are in wonderful, wonderful, wonderful company. Because it's successful people in life that have admitted it. The people, people think, oh, it's a performance issue. I said, no, it's not. Coming from human resources, I've worked with a lot of different wonderful people in all of my career. And the people that are challenged by performance, or the people that have performance issues, are usually, they don't really think, they think they can do anything, actually. That's usually part of the problem, is that they think they're much better than they actually are. So that's a whole nother category. It's the people that are already successful, that are on a successful track, that have figured out certain things, and then they get stymied and stuck and blocked by imposter syndrome. So you name it in our public domain, Michelle Obama, the late Maya Angelou, who was a prolific artist.
Her. Oh, and I love her.
She has one of the best quotes on imposter syndrome that's out there. When you Google imposter syndrome, she talks about how she has written 11 books. She was already on her 11th or 12th book. And she says, I think people are going to find out I'm pulling one over on people, that I'm not who they think I am. So in other words, public domain is full of people that have admitted to it. And so the beautiful part on that is we're all in incredible company. So to your point, do a lot of people have it? Absolutely. Is it something that could be part of everybody's DNA? Absolutely. At first, it was always thought like, oh, females have it more than males. Females actually have this more than males. It had nothing to do with gender. It had everything to do with who was admitting it, first and foremost. Yeah. And females were the first, from an emotional intelligence perspective, to say, I got this going on. I'm feeling like this. Males were at first like, I don't have any of that. Now it's almost equal from the latest stats. And from a coaching standpoint, when I coach people that I work with, 50-50. It for the folks that admit it, it's across the board.
Oh, so really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
You worked in HR, now you're a coach and you're helping people one-on-one and in groups and so on and so forth. What is one practice, if it were up to you, that you could bring from your coaching into an HR department in any company, any corporation, whatever? What is one thing that you would incorporate and say, this is what HR needs in order to make the employees feel safe and wanted and be enthusiastic about what they're doing?
It's acknowledging the uniqueness and the values the employees bring to the organization versus the other way around. We spend so much time talking about a company's values and aligning to a company's values that we don't spend enough time talking about what each unique person, just as we just talked about, when Rainey said she's weird, the finesse on that word or the reframe on that is that we're unique. But we don't spend time trying to bring that hybrid into the organization and create sort of the mosaic around that. We look at it the other way around, and we try to conform people into alignment of values. Some of these companies are spectacular and they're wonderful, but you still align to the values of that organization versus trying to find a middle ground. And I understand, coming from the corporate world for decades, I understand that takes a unique approach. It takes a lot of management. It takes a lot of awareness on the people. And organizations don't always have the self-awareness that they like to profess their employees have, because they themselves are not self-aware. So they don't create a culture that embraces that. So that right there is one thing. I think if we did more of that, some of the imposter pieces that exist in organizations, because organizations deal with imposter syndrome all along, or all the time, they just don't talk about it, would begin to get diluted. When I was sitting in that church and I was thinking like, okay, what do I want to do? What do I need to do? And it became very apparent that I needed to change what I was doing in my life and so forth. And I said, well, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen if I do this? If I leave this job and I go out and kind of forge something on my own, okay, the worst that can happen is according to conventional standards, I fail miserably and I just go back and get a job somewhere. Am I okay getting a job at Starbucks? Am I okay getting a job at Walmart? Can I go and get a grocery store and bag groceries like I used to do all through college? Absolutely. Would I be okay doing that? Absolutely. Okay. If that's the worst that can happen, Paul, then go,
that's the worst that can happen.
Do it. You've got faith in yourself to be able to kind of figure that out. And a lot of times we don't want the no to that, the no's can be.
Oh yeah. But it's scary. It's scary.
Well, it's a bummer.
It's a bummer, but then I just look at it.
But it doesn't kill you.
No,
it doesn't kill you.
I just look at it that our vibrations are just not aligned. The vibrations are just not aligned right now. They might real quickly. My book was written based on my life. The book is called Find Your Voice as a Leader. And it really is about your leadership in life. Yeah. And the title was given to me by one of my clients. So I was working with him in an organization, and I would talk about, you have a voice, you have a unique voice, you have a creative voice, you have a platform, don't waste, let's find your unique voice. And he looked at me and he goes, that's your brand. You are the Find Your Voice guy. And I'm like, wow. So I took voice and I created a methodology around it. It's about discovering your values, establishing, creating your outcomes, demonstrating your influence, revealing your courage, and then creating and crafting your overall artistic expression. So it's values, outcomes, influence, courage, expression. So the book kind of walks you through sort of those exercises around that. But that's what I did in my life. That's what I did in the beginning in that church. In that church. Yeah. Because the values, my values is when I recognize that, and then everything else kind of came after that for me.
Do you have social media that people can find you on, Paul?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. So Paul N. Larsen, Larsen. I'm on Twitter still at Voice as a Leader.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I built up a good following on Twitter, and so I don't want to just abandon it right now. I'm going to kind of see what happens there.
No, I get it. I get it.
And then on Facebook, I have Find Your Voice as a Leader. I have a pretty active business page there with about 30,000 followers.
Fantastic.
We have a wonderful. Well, we have some wonderful conversations and so forth. And then certainly my website and email, people can connect with me at any point. I've got lots of fun stuff. And again, I do things that inspire me versus things that kind of like feel forced. I like what's going to inspire me, what's going to like bring more color into my life, and the beautiful people like you two into my life that we had not met before.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
oh, Paul, thank you
perfect.
so much for doing this.
Oh, this is wonderful.
It really
Thank
made
you.
my
Thank you.
day.
Thank
It
you for
made
the
my
opportunity.
day. Okay, buddy. Have a good
Okay.
day.
Take care.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank you so
take care.
much.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Happy
Bye.
holidays.